Hey fellow bike people. If you watch a lot of bike related content on YouTube, you're probably familiar with the cheap bike challenge format. The cheap bike challenge is kind of a rite of passage on YouTube. It seems like every big bike YouTuber does it in some way, shape, or form. I'm not even that big of a YouTuber, but my whole Project Used Bike series that I did a while back was just cheap bike challenges with myself. The general format goes like YouTuber goes to big box store and buys cheap bike, takes it to place to do hardcore riding, does hardcore riding, bike breaks. They make the point that basic bikes are not as good as premium bikes. So in a literal sense, no, they don't fake those videos. They literally take the bike and they destroy it. But we're past the point in the bike industry where the BSO is a thing, the bicycle shaped object. The industry has evolved a lot in the last couple years, and I have to do a bit of a history lesson to explain it. I'm going to try and make this brief because I go over this in a lot of my videos. This is my interpretation of a theory by a guy called Rick Vosper on Bicycle Retailer and Industry News, and it's the Bike 4.0 theory. It's essentially the bike industry has been through 4 major generations since the end of the World Wars, and we're currently in the 4th one. The 3rd generation was kind of the early 2000s or so up till about 2019. It was expected to end around about now originally, but with the whole everything that happened in 2020 kind of accelerated the process. The reason I bring this up is in Bike 3.0, there was a very big divide between a premium bicycle that sold at a bicycle shop and a bicycle shaped object that was sold at a department store or a big corporate retailer. The quickest way I can explain why that was because of exclusive deals in terms of manufacturing and shipping, and the channels were just set within the industry. After the whole shipping crisis in 2020, that's been changed up, so corporate retailers actually have access to a lot of stuff that they didn't before. Now, what I want to get across here is that in a less literal sense, the YouTubers are kind of faking those videos because they're really cherry picking really basic bikes that are essentially holdovers from the Bike 3.0 generation, rather than doing it properly, finding a good deal on a bike that's actually pretty reasonable. Because, fight me on this, you can get a good bike at a big corporate retailer these days, and I'm going to show you how to do it cheap. In general, I focus on used bikes, like old cheap ones that people are generally throwing out or selling for dirt prices. That's because a lot of them can be easily fixed up and they have some really nice qualities. Like even back in the day, there was still some pretty good bikes that were affordable. Like there's a lot of exceptions and gray areas to pretty much every rule in the bike industry. But this time, I specifically want to do this with a new bike, something that's just fresh from the showroom floor, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, I am going to do this at Sport Check, and full disclosure, I work at Sport Check, but I don't represent the company in any way. I can't speak for them. This is not endorsed, approved, or sponsored in any way by Canadian Tire or Sport Check. This is just my opinions as a cyclist. Now, something about Sport Check, and this is a bit of myth busting here, I used to believe that Sport Check was ridiculously overpriced and you would only go there if you just had too much money to burn. That was before I realized kind of how the business actually works, and the prices are expensive because they sell premium products. It's brand names. Sport Check doesn't set their own prices. The brands do. It's not something they control directly. But what they do is ridiculous sales. Now, all the big corporate retailers do some sort of members program or special deals and then big seasonal sales. And looking into that is where you can really start to get some good prices. And what I'm going to be using is a VIP code from Virgin Mobile with Sport Check. And as I understand it, literally every Virgin Mobile customer in Canada got a VIP code that they can get pretty much staff pricing at Sport Check. And yeah, I'm not going to use my staff discount. I'm just going to use the VIP code and what's available. So, let's be YouTubers. Let's go to Sport Check. Just gonna take a little moment of hubris here. I got to build all of this, and I love playing with toys for a living. So, the kids' bikes, these are very nice, but they're obviously not what we're looking for. The urban mountain bikes, the commuters, the hybrids, the comfort bikes, again, very nice and some great deals here, but not what we're looking for. The Diamondback mountain bikes, okay, yeah, I'm kind of tempted. There are a few of these that I really want, but not what we're after. The GTs, yeah, these are out of the price range, so no. Getting to the BMX bikes, we got a couple options to choose from.
There's the GT Air, there's the Capex Rail, and then there's the one that I decided to go with. This is the Capex Villain. The GT Air was still a little too expensive, the Capex Rail was a bit too basic, and there was nothing else in stock, so I think this is the perfect Goldilocks bike for this situation. I'm gonna give this bike a fighting chance of being cool, so I'm gonna take off all the reflectors because, come on, it's a BMX bike. And I'm also gonna give it a bolt check. I know I built this thing, and I trust my own abilities, of course, but, even I have off days, and I might have missed something, so we're gonna do this properly, and I'm gonna make sure everything is all tight.
Alright, we're back with the Capex Villain. This thing is actually pretty cool. So, sticker price is just over $300. With the VIP code, this thing was down to just over $150. I paid tax on that and then got the $100 off with a provincial rebate. So it basically cost me under $100. Now, what I would consider to be the industry standard in terms of a just over $300 BMX bike would be something like the Haro Downtown. I sold Haro for a long time at Cyclepath, and the Downtown was one of our best sellers. It was affordable, it had just the right setup of parts so that it was tough, it was easy to ride, and it was fairly low maintenance. They cheaped out where it was okay to cheap out, is what I'm saying. And this bike, it's built by a more corporate company. Capex is actually owned by Sportjack. So just like with Haro or any other established BMX brand, when the parent company is designing this bike, they're going to pick and choose parts to make it hit a certain price point. They need to be able to make a certain amount of margin while also keeping the price low enough that the customer is going to be attracted to it. And they want to stack it with features that they think the customer is looking for. With the Villain, I think they did a pretty good job. And let me talk you through some of the features.
So this looks pretty good overall. The geometry is maybe a little long in the back end, but it feels natural for a BMX bike. The top tube is a good length for an adult rider. The bottom bracket sits low enough that it doesn't feel awkward. It's got fairly big handlebars. It's got some nice little touches like the angles on the fork here. And yeah, I gotta say, overall, pretty good. There are a few things that I would consider weird. Not bad, just not what I would have chosen if I was expecting something like the Haro Downtown.
Now, what you're probably expecting me to point out as the weird bit is the affixed gyro. And I gotta say, I'm not a huge fan personally, but no, that's not that weird. Lots of companies have tried internal gyros. Like this one, the design came from KHE, and they've done a bunch of different internal designs over the years. It's functional, it works fine. My kind of complaint about it is that things can get jammed up inside there, and it's really a complicated system. There's a lot of really small parts. No, what's actually kind of weird about this bike is the drivetrain, like everything in this area of the bike.
Now looking at it from right here, it looks like a pretty standard drivetrain on a BMX bike. Like it's normal 25-9 micro drive. It's got the oversized axle in the back. It's got 3-piece cranks up in the front. I see nothing wrong with it, but if we move to another angle, we can see these are not tubular cranks. That is a forged crank. Now those are perfectly strong for like entry-level riding, even the intermediate riders. They're not going to break or bend or anything. The problem is they're heavy. Now, this is where I was talking about the trade-off in price points and performance. In here, this is a mid-bottom bracket, and I'm going to show you that later. That is a much more expensive and more durable design that's actually more lightweight than what I would expect to see here, which is the American bottom bracket. So that's the trade-off. The cranks aren't as good as I would expect, but the bearing set in the middle is better. And then this rear wheel, this weirds me out. That, at first glance, looks like a normal oversized rear BMX axle, but it's not. The sizes, the skinny one is a 10mm, the large one is a 14mm in general. This one is a 12mm, which means it's really weird and hard to find parts for it, and it gets even weirder, which again I'm going to go into in a minute.
So now it's time for my favorite part, the live dissection.
The first part I've taken off is the handlebars. You can see the welds here, they're nothing fancy, but they're not what I would call a peanut weld. Like, that's plenty functional. So, decent quality. It's a fairly big bar, and it's also very wide, which is better for like a tall rider or a bigger rider, obviously. And the grips, I gotta say, pretty good effort on the grips. The Mason, it's not like a brand name grip that you can buy from the more established bike companies I was talking about earlier, but it's pretty close. Like, they've done a really good job of imitating that with the feel and the look and the branding, so props on that. In fact, that handlebar is so nice that I had to use it to upgrade this donation bike for Safe Summerside. I've already got a new home for this one lined up, and can't wait to see how the kid reacts. And I'm really glad I got those new handlebars on there, because the old ones were honestly a little bit bent, and I was not happy with that. Next up is the affixed gyro system, and this is what I mean about being excessively complicated. From the lever, it starts off pretty normal. It's just a regular brake cable, and then you realize, oh no, it's actually a set length in a single piece that I had to cut because the rest of it got jammed up as I was taking it out. As I said, these things are fiddly. This mounts into the holes on this thing, which pulls against this, so that slides up and down the fork, is held in by that at the bottom. And it's, oh boy. Yeah, that's excessively complicated. I won't be putting that back on the bike. These cutouts are another big drawback of the affixed gyro system. Now, because of their location, they're not going to be a structural problem. They won't compromise the bike or anything like that, but a lot of people don't want a big ugly cutout on the side of their frame. Part of the trade-off thing I was talking about is, in exchange for putting the extra money into that, this bike has what's called a standard headset. These are cups that press fit into the frame rather than being machined in. And the reason I call that a trade-off is that the machined-in cups, or the integrated cups, usually use sealed bearings, whereas this is using regular ball bearings. So, slightly less expensive headset, still perfectly functional, but the trade-off is it has the fancier gyro system instead of the better headset that Haro would use. Moving down to the cranks, we can see what I was talking about earlier with the forged instead of tubular design. That is not a tube, it's not round, it's like a forged shape. And again, that's still perfectly strong for most riders, it's just a lot heavier. And the trade-off is, you can see in here, there's no threading and the bearings haven't come with it. That is a sealed bearing type axle. So that is actually a pretty big upgrade over what I would expect. And moving up to the frame, this is why. On the Haro that I like comparing this bike to, it has the tubular cranks, but it has the American bottom bracket where it is just ball bearings in here that look like what we saw up in the headset. This is a sealed bearing. These are slightly slimmer this way, they're much lighter weight, and the big thing is they're smooth and really low maintenance, if not maintenance free. So this is something I would actually consider a big upgrade over the Haro. It's just not what I would expect to see on a bike at this price point. And I must say, I am pleasantly surprised to see that. Now, the last major area I want to talk about is the wheel set. So, this is a decent choice, but again, it's something that I would not expect to see on a bike at this price point. On paper, this is significantly higher end than you see at anything else within this kind of price range. If we look at the front hub, we can see that it's made out of separate pieces pressed together. That is a steel hub. That is not great, but that is what's expected at bikes, even up a few price points from this. If we look at the rear hub, we can see it's actually machined all out of one solid piece of aluminum, so that is a much higher end hub. It's going to be much stiffer, much longer lasting, and I'd say there's a good chance that it has sealed bearings in the center of it. It's the choice of the 12mm axle that I'm kind of questioning that makes me think it's weird rather than just a direct upgrade. So because this is a 12mm axle, it doesn't directly fit on really any frame in production. I'm sure there must be a frame with 12mm slots or this wouldn't exist, but most, if not all frames, have either 10mm or 14mm slots. So you need these little top hat adapters that are a very unusual size to make this fit a frame. Now while that works fine, it's the pegs that that kind of confuses me because that makes it really difficult to buy replacement pegs. And this peg, unless you have a 12 millimeter axle, doesn't fit safely on any bike. It won't fit over a 14 millimeter axle, and it's going to be loose and move around on a 10 millimeter. So I imagine you would have to go to a hardware store or something to find more washers like this, because I can't think of any production bike company that makes those. As for the tires, they're branded K-Pix, but I'm very familiar with these. These are the XL tires that are spec'd on a ton of other BMX bikes. They were on a lot of Norco bikes that I sold a while back, actually. So, decent tire. I gotta say from experience, zero grip indoors. If you're using this at a skate park or an indoor bike park, maybe consider a different tire. But if you're gonna be on rougher terrain or do dirt jumps, this tire is actually pretty wicked. And now that the frame is exposed, we can see this is actually pretty solid work as well. Same with the handlebars. It's not what I would call a full-on peanut weld, but it's pretty decent. It's going to hold together well. The steel seems to be reasonably good quality. It doesn't feel too tinny. That said, I'm not a metallurgist, so don't quote me on that. It has the upgraded bottom bracket, which I'm a huge fan of. It's got the longer top tube, so it's going to fit a taller rider. I'm pretty happy with this overall.
So I didn't destroy it by riding it, but I made it unrideable by taking it apart and analyzing it. I gotta say, I hope I made my point that there are actually good bikes that you can buy really cheap at big corporate retailers. You don't have to get good bikes from a bike shop these days. If you're gonna criticize a modern entry-level bike like this, you gotta keep a couple things in mind. First of all is the price point. It's really affordable. Even 5 or 10 years ago, something for only $300, you weren't getting an amazing bike. This one's got a lot of really cool features, and I'm happy with it. The second thing you gotta keep in mind is that every bike company cheaps out somewhere. That's their job, is to cheap out in ways where they can save money but still deliver a good product to their customer. With a bike like this, it's more weird instead of bad choices these days. It has a lot of really high-end features that make it really good for its dollar. It just has a few things that, if you're an experienced bike rider, they're not maybe what you would expect. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. BMX is also a sport that's all about customization with your equipment. And something like this is going to be, in my opinion, a great starter platform for somebody who wants to get into BMX, even if they are, my age and a full-grown adult. I think it's a great starter platform. You pick this up, you buy a few upgrades, you maybe then buy a new frame once you're done with this one, but great place to start. Now that I'm done with this thing, I paid so little money for it that I'm actually going to rebuild it in a way that I would be happy to ride it if I was a beginner BMXer, and I'm going to donate it to the Safe Summerside program because share the love, right?